Tensions are rising across the world. This time is between Israel and the Islamic Republic of Iran. On Friday, when the hostilities started, the world witnessed a drawdown in the major equities markets globally. Oil prices have bounced back up. Oil prices have bounced back up to around $75 per barrel, and we can say the Nigerian budget is in safe territory. Welcome to Economy and Markets, where we give you a comprehensive breakdown of market and economic activities. I'm your host, David Olujimi. On Friday, June 13, hostilities started in the Middle East as Israel attacked Iran with a series of calculated bomb blasts in the capital, Tehran. Iran retaliated with a barrage of missiles on cities in Israel, Tel Aviv, Haifa, Jerusalem, and as of today, both countries do not seem to be letting down, as there is still a transfer of surface-to-surface missiles from both countries. Why does this matter to Nigerians? The question is, and the answer is definitely oil, basically. Oil is our major source of revenue, and in Iran, oil is also the major source of revenue. In the immediate aftermath of that attack on Friday, global oil prices jumped to a 2-month high. Brent crude, the international benchmark, basically surged to $77 per barrel, hitting a price we've not seen since February of this year. On Sunday, early trading this morning, it was around $75 per barrel, but behind the volatility, there's a growing risk. Israel is now targeting oil and gas infrastructure in Iran. What does that mean for all of us? Iran isn't just any oil producer. It holds the world's 4th largest proven oil reserves. That's behind Russia, the US, Saudi Arabia. Iran is number 4 on that list. If its production is disrupted further, we could be looking at sustained upward pressure on oil prices globally. For Nigeria, a higher oil price in the international market is a double-edged sword. Why? On the upside, Nigeria will gain more in crude oil revenues at a time where every dollar counts. Our budget is benchmarked against the oil price at $75 per barrel. However, some weeks ago, oil prices was tending $62, $63, $65 per barrel, and with our oil production way behind the production target for the budget, any rally will provide some form of temporary fiscal relief. But here's the catch: unlike in the past, crude oil prices now actively affect the price of petrol, diesel, and other fuels in Nigeria. Although we have significantly reduced our importation of refined petroleum products, we are still an importer of refined petrol. At least we saw that in Q1 2025, our petrol importation was down by 54%. However, there is still a portion of our petrol that comes from imported petrol. And even with that, we are also, even as we earn from crude export, we also now are importers of crude oil. With Dangote Refinery basically sourcing all of its crude, all of its resources, all of its raw materials from the US and from countries such as Saudi Arabia. What it means when oil prices go up is that Nigerians will be paying more on petrol, diesel, and aviation fuel. What's the effect of that? The increase in fuel will basically result in some inflationary pressures. We are not out of the inflationary circle yet, so it's a double-edged sword. When there's crude oil increase, when there's crude oil revenue increases, there will also be a part where the public may have to grapple with some fresh shocks from oil prices increase in the world. And on the show this morning, we have Dr. Ayodele Oni, who is a partner at Bloomfield Law Practice. He is the energy partner at that law firm. Good morning, Dr. Ayo.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I thought I lost you for a moment there. So
No.
we're going to, the first thing is we're in a precarious situation. It's like I said, the double-edged sword. We're going to start with, from your perspective, what are the trends that Nigerians should be watching when it comes to oil prices, crude oil prices over the next few weeks?
Okay, so one interesting thing is that we now refine locally. Prior to now, we hardly ever had a net benefit. Net benefit in the sense that, when international crude oil prices go up, prices of refined products will go up. And if we are able to sell more, it then means we will make more money, right?
Yes.
But because we were buying even finished products, net we were still somewhat in a deficit, not a positive position. But now that we refine locally, it means that we can make more forex, even if Dangote does buy some of it from abroad. Recall that even when you buy locally, you may buy in naira, but because it's an international price, if there's no subsidy of some sort, you'll still be buying it at the international price. But there are jobs. We keep our USD, our naira is stronger. The idea of spending trillions quarterly, bringing in petroleum products isn't the case anymore. I see what he's trying to do is even trying to cut off the logistics and the middlemen to ensure that the prices are lower ultimately at the pump. So for Nigerians, what we should watch out for, as long as, and you know, these hostilities have been on since 1979, when you had the Islamic Revolution. Iran had always
Yes.
seen Israel as an enemy, and also because of issues around that monarch whose name I don't remember now, that was deposed, and Israel had links with issues around westernization and Iran's nuclear weapons program, right? So they've always been enemies. So these new hostilities, once you have hostilities, oil prices are always very they fluctuate a lot. They once you have rumors, even if you don't have wars, once you have rumors of
Of
war,
wars, I know.
then prices can go up, right? So if prices go up, the more you are able to sell internationally, the more you're able to produce, then you get that benefit. Yes, locally you may then there may be a net off because you then have to buy prices higher. I mean that's for the citizens, right? Higher at the pump, but for the country, its revenues would be better, particularly because we no longer, or we should no longer, be importing finished products. So it will be a net benefit for us, even though prices may be higher at the pumps, but won't be as high as they would have been if we had to import, because costs such as insurance, freight, STS, that's ship to ship, and all of those aren't going to be the case. So I think for Nigeria, it's going to be a net, it's going to be beneficial. And if you consider what the benchmark price for oil was in the budget and where oil prices seem to be headed, it could be for us, good for us, but depending on how long this also lasts, right?
So, like you said,
And remember,
it's
Iran is even under sanctions at the moment, and they sell largely, I think, to China,
yeah.
not
You
too much
said
elsewhere in
it
the
could be
world.
good for us. That's one thing I always tell people around the way the world works and the way Nigeria works. We work in different directions. So one question I want to ask now, you said now we've talked about the domestic impact of it. I want to talk about our oil sales. Basically, about a third of all of the oil that is transported via sea is transported through the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is located somewhere in between Iran and the UAE. Basically, it's around the Persian Gulf area. So, according to reports, just about a third of all of the global crude oil sales passes through that location. Do you think anything, if there's going to be a disruption in that location, do you think it's going to affect Nigeria's oil exports? Do we have anything to do with that?
Of course, if there are those disruptions in the Persian Gulf, and there could be those challenges, which is almost unusual, almost never happens, because you have stuff like the UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on Laws of the Seas. You know, you have international conventions that protect right of way and all of those sort of
Okay.
things. You know, you've got your um, economic zones, your EEZ, is an exclusive economic zones. You've got international waters, and you've got conventions that protect transportation right across the world. I do not think that it get to that point, but I don't think it'll get to that point. But yes, if there are disruptions, of course, it would affect our own ability to export as much as we currently do, because
Another
much of that much of the crude will be carried via vessels and not international pipelines.
So another question I want to ask is around the refinery feedstock. You know that Dangote is importing majority of his oil use from countries around that region of the world, apart from the USA. So he imports a lot of WTI, imports a lot of Brent crude, and quite a bit of that passes through that particular location. Don't you think we are going to have, is it not going to have some kind of effect? Are we going to, is it going to shift to buying Nigerian crude, considering the fact that Nigerian crude is quite more pricey than what he buys presently?
Okay, yeah. So naturally, like you are aware, there's domestic crude supply obligation where every producer is supposed to reserve a particular quantity of crude for domestic use. Government more and more has been trying to enforce that through the NUPRC, such that they are able to get more crude, maybe even in naira, right? And then it cuts off some of those challenges around being able to bring in crude where there are challenges. Once we can do local, act local, think local, it cuts off, once you import, you are subjected to the vagaries of international politics. You are subjected to the vagaries of international transportation, haulage, and all of those. So if we can do more around domestic crude supply obligation, it cuts off the need to import more, to think about logistics, haulage, and all of that. So if there are issues around that the Gulf, the Persian Gulf, and logistics, of course, it would affect us. It would affect how much it can then refine. But if we can think local, act local, do more around local production and the domestic crude supply obligation, then things improve. I know there's been forward sale arrangement where Nigeria has already pledged volumes of its crude. But the juniors, whether it's the IOCs, whether it's the indigenous companies, whether it's even the NNPCL, there are those forward sale agreements for raising financing that means that a reasonable portion of our crude prior to now had been charged under those arrangements. But I see that more and more is being done, particularly with the sale of crude, sale of assets to Seplat, to Renaissance, Total's transaction too. A number of those deals have gone up and have been successful and have received regulatory approval from the minister. I mean, and it's the president who is the minister ultimately. He's got two junior ministers for gas and for petroleum, right? But he's ultimately, so those deals have crossed. And you realize that recently, Seplat reported that production had increased by, I think it was 14% since it's bought ExxonMobil's assets. So I think that's also crucial to whatever we do around the crude supply obligation and ensuring that we can substantially get oil, crude from Nigeria, and then refine locally rather than always relying on international transportation and haulage. So yes, it could be a challenge, but if we think and act local, then it reduces the impact substantially too.
So one question I would have loved to dive deeper into the crude oil swap deals, but one question I want to ask is around price shocks. Now, practically, are we expecting any pass-through effect on the increase in oil prices on pump prices in Nigeria? Oil prices are going up, so are we going to be expecting any? From your own perspective, do you think there's going to be any increase in oil pump prices?
Oh yes, I expect that, depending on how long it lasts. If it's a short, if it ends very soon and they have stock in place already, the chances are that we may not immediately see a change. We may never then even see a change if it ends. But if it continues, if it extended, there's no way we won't. Because recall, crude oil is international. Even the NNPCL or whoever is selling locally will want to match international oil price, even if you get a small discount because of your local issues. As long as the base resource, which you refine, if the cost of the base resource goes up, the price of the final product will go up, even if refining cost remains stable. So if you refine for say $2, say $18 per barrel, and crude oil prices used to be 60 and they've gone up to 80 or 90 or 100. Of course, there's no way the final product is going to be more expensive, because remember the refiners and the traders who buy and then sell to refiners are going to pay more, and the refiners will only be refining a product. So if the base price goes up, there's no way it's not going to go up in Nigeria. Also because there isn't subsidy. It may not be, it wouldn't have been the case if there was subsidy, because government can then take that shock, right?
Yes.
Government can absorb the shock and pay those guys the difference. But if it's market driven, remember market forces of demand and supply, and if the base cost goes up, it's going to affect what you find at the pumps.
So one
So if
question.
it's extended, then it will affect us.
Finally, one question I have to ask, because we are late and we're running behind schedule, is what policy measure do you think the government can implement to always try to insulate Nigerians from some of these shocks, especially when conflict escalates? Now we are thrown into a situation where some years ago Nigerians really did not care. All of the global conflicts that led to the escalation in oil prices. I mean, at the point oil prices were around 120, get close to 130. Nigerians were buying petrol for how much? 97 naira per liter, less than, just around 50 cents at the time. So what policy measures do you think the Nigerian government can take, even as subsidies out, to insulate Nigerians from some of the shocks?
Okay, to be honest, one key thing government can do is to support, and this government has been doing well when it comes to oil and gas, to be completely honest, right? In terms of policy, the policy direction seems quite smart. Some of these fiscal policies, fiscal incentives should continue. We should continue to push and ensure that we can have more domestic supply obligation enforced locally. If we have domestic supply obligation enforced
Okay.
locally, it means that it reduces the impact on us, particularly where increased tensions mean that logistics become more expensive, right? If we're producing locally and we're refining locally, we'll be insulated from those sorts. But from the pricing regime, it'll be difficult to be completely insulated, because if the base price goes up. So it's local, thinking and doing local. If we think local, enforce supply obligations, it then means that some of those other factors which pricing may have escalated or gone up will not affect us directly. That's one angle. Another angle is that you can't speak about oil and gas without looking at the broader politics and economic realities. If more people have jobs, companies pay better, the economy generally improves, people are able to further absorb it. And other things government can do is to play around the tax regime, right? When there are issues such as this, you can play around your tax regime so that people have more disposable income. If people have more disposable income, it then means that that shock will not be as telling as it would have been if people's disposable income remains what it was before the shock. So that's one thing government can do. That's the way they're able to say you can net off your tax from building roads and even get some additional incentives. You can also have that where in situations where substantial change in oil prices, it means government is getting more revenue, more USD revenues. It then means that the currency will be stable. If you then add a tax, if you suspend tax obligations or reduce those tax obligations for a short period of time, people are able to have more disposable income, and people are able to better absorb some of those. I think that's something worth considering. It'll be largely fiscal, right? And an improved economy overall. If the economy improves, the fiscals improve, you can produce local, you can have power supply. If you have power supply, and it means fewer people need to buy even petroleum products. If you have good power supply, if you also ensure that you have more means of transportation, people can do rail, people can do water. I wouldn't need to buy fuel in my car every day, and the volume of fuel I'll buy reduces substantially if I have 24-hour electricity, public power, and then I have many means of transportation. It just means I drive my car for a few minutes, put it on a trawl, or put it on a boat that can take me to the other side of town, and then I drive for another 5 minutes. I'm in my office, rather than drive for an hour or two coming from the mainland to the island, right? I then can use water transportation. That would reduce my cost of PMS every day, and it'll be economics of scale too. So
that's all we can take for this morning. Thank you so much, Dr. Ayo, for lending us your time once more.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Have a lovely morning.
Thank you.
That's all we can take on economy and markets this morning on BDTV. We'll see you again on Wednesday. We'll be talking again on the oil and gas sector, this time looking at NNPC and its April 2025 report. Have a lovely morning.